Your gun zero is off and you probably don't even know it. Garrett and I have spent a long time at the range learning some interesting things over the last few weeks. I want to share them with you. Here's one. This is our first show and tell. So shooting this with a suppressor, all I've done is just made sure it's snugged up. On YouTube, I am not allowed to tighten a suppressor on there. They consider that gun modification. So it's just snugged up, just like normal. I'm gonna take 2 shots and you'll see this is a very accurate gun. Okay, second shot. Okay, cool. Shots are maybe a 1/4 inch apart. Now, I'm gonna put 2 more shots. This time, I'm gonna aim at that top circle, but all I'm gonna do, I can't show you, we're gonna have to not show this, but I'm just gonna have my suppressor just a tiny bit loose. Just a 1/4 turn is it, just a 1/4 turn. Just like it bumped loose while you were hunting or something. Okay, I realize how dumb that is that we had to censor making the suppressor a 1/4 turn loose, but YouTube is what it is. Okay, I'm aiming for that top tiny little circle here and watch where this goes. Make my best shot possible. So ignore these shots, those previous groups. So we took 2 shots with this as our aim point and they were right there. The next 2 shots with the suppressor loose, this was the aiming point and they landed down there. That is like 5 inches away from the point of aim, just with that suppressor being a 1/4 turn loose. So PSA, absolutely obsessively check that muzzle brake and suppressor when you're out hunting to make sure it doesn't work loose on you. You would miss a deer at 200 yards if that suppressor is just a 1/4 turn loose. Your zero matters, and that's what this whole video is about. Tons of things that can lead to everything being planned, having the best equipment, and then missing in the moment of truth, all because the zero was off. So the first mistake that we can easily make is just having anything rattle loose on that gun before the moment of truth when you need to make your shot. And we saw the dramatic example of a 1/4 turn on a suppressor. Now let's talk about the second mistake, and the reason why a zero can be off is shooting too few shots in order to determine your zero. So before each hunting season, friends come out of the woodwork and say, hey, you know, can you help me get my gun dialed in for hunting season? Really enjoy doing that. And often what I see, almost always I'll see, is I'll go shooting with a guy and, you know, he'll shoot, dial his turret until he, you know, gets that first bullseye. And as soon as he shoots a bullseye, he says, oh, got my zero, perfect. Stands up and walks away. And I always say, wait, let's think about it though, because your gun isn't shooting one hole. There's a little dispersion in there, right? And so if you shoot too few shots, you may have determined your zero based on one that happened to be a little bit of an outlier and wasn't the actual center of where your group actually is. So we did a little demonstration out in the field to demonstrate this. Garrett is getting ready for his first big game hunt.
Yeah, that's right.
He thinks he's going to take this 6.8 Western. This is a Winchester XPR and a copper impact load. So he's going to take 20 shots, and we're going to pretend he took a 1-shot zero, a 3-shot zero, a 5-shot zero, a 10-shot zero, and a 20-shot zero. So we're going to take the center of those groups at each of those numbers to see that, you know, at the 20-shot zero, that's where, you know, hey, really that's where it should be zeroed. We'll see how far off he would have been if he had done it with too few shots to get a zero. Ready?
I'm ready.
Let's do this. So as we're shooting this, you'll notice the very first shot was as good as we're going to get it. Less than a click between that bullet impact and the bullseye, right? And so we say, ha, that's our zero. But what if we put a little bit more data in it? Now let's shoot a 3-shot group. If we were to take the center of that group, the zero would actually be here on the target. But now what happens if we shoot a 5-shot group? Get a little bit more data about our grouping. You see the zero would now be here. How about a 10-shot group? the 0 would be here. And a 15-shot group, the 0 would be here. And so seeing all of that, you say, whoa, it's actually pretty scary to just get a 0 off 1 or even a 3-shot group. Now, this gun, it's, I don't know, pretty demonstrative, I guess, of what you'd see in a hunting class rifle, where, you know, not tiny little groups. And so, especially there, more shots is necessary. The more accurate your gun is, the fewer shots it's going to take. But even so, I would at least shoot a 10-shot group to really determine my 0. Shoot more shots in your 0 and it'll be a lot more accurate. Act 3, a reason that your 0 might be off without you even realizing it. For that, we need to uncover a mystery with this gun. This is one of our most used guns. It's the Sig Cross. Also, I've got to show you this. This is sick. Check out right here. These are called turret tags. They're quick adjust yardage stickers for any scope. And so you can just, you know, you have the sticker on there to mark what the distance is, and then you don't have to be messing with an app or get a custom turret that's going to be different every time you go out in different conditions. You just have your, you know, you dial the 300, whoop, done. All right, super quick. It comes like this. This is turret tags. Just has all your quick adjust yardage stickers, and then it has a clear strip afterward that you put on to just lock them all on so they don't get bumped. Weatherproof, everything. That's awesome for hunting. But this gun has that wandering 0, so we're actually going to take it out right now. Last week we perfectly zeroed this scope. We shot, you know, multiple 5-shot groups, got it zeroed perfectly. Then, you know, we took it back in the truck, hung it here, and we're taking it out to the range now. Similar conditions, same everything. In fact, the same place that we're even shooting. And let's see if this thing is actually zeroed. And it's not. Here's the group. The 0 wandered a lot, a whole lot in that time. And so we've got to figure out what's going on. I think it could be 2 culprits here. 1, it could be the scope rings. These are cheapo scope rings from Monstrum Tactical on Amazon. Now, don't beat me up too much for using cheap scope rings. I like testing stuff on this channel because, you know, everybody always says, buy the best scope rings you can get. Well, I'm like, well, let's see. Let's try the cheap ones and let's see if they do hold 0. So it could be the scope rings. There are even 3 screws here, so there's a lot of material holding it. Or maybe it's not the scope rings at all. Maybe it's this scope that when it's getting bumped, it's actually losing 0. So here's how we find out if the scope returns to 0. So I've leveled the scope out into a collimator, right? And so this is showing a perfect reticle here. It doesn't really matter that they don't match up, whatever. But look at the exact spot where the crosshairs of the scope are in the crosshairs of the collimator. Now we'll take it off. And we're going to give this thing some violent blows, like it's getting bounced around in a truck, whatever, getting bounced around in your backpack. We're going to put this thing up pretty good, and then we're going to put it back on the collimator, and you can see it has perfectly returned to 0. We've done this test about 15 times here to see if there's anything that could possibly be happening as it's bouncing around in the truck or whatever. It's just not the scope's fault here. All I can really point to is the scope rings. So we're going to put on some very nice scope rings and we're going to see how it performs long term. We'll keep you updated in a future video to see if that fixed the wandering 0. I forgot there is one other possibility that here is, so the Sig Cross uses a weird Picatinny rail. Usually the Picatinny rail will only be attached to the action. This one is not. It has 4 screws and it goes on to the handguard. And I also wonder if that could possibly be causing the wandering 0, having the handguard or the shots could actually be moving something with the rail here. I have them glued in everything. Anyway, we're going to experiment, see how we fix our wandering 0. But that's something that I really like to obsess about, especially with a gun that I'm going hunting with, because It doesn't matter how good your zero is. If you drive 50 miles, go hunt in the mountains, if your zero's off by 4 inches, that's just not going to work. Another one we saw at the last time we did the 600-yard challenge, Twinkie had brought a gun that somebody else scoped up for him. And when they did, they'd push the scope ring really far forward, right to where the scope starts to bell out toward the objective. And he was shooting great the first two stages, and then all of a sudden he was missing. And so we checked his zero, and sure enough, his zero was way off. And I think the recoil of the gun had pushed that scope back. It wasn't getting a good purchase on the tube, and that's why it caused problems. So make sure those scope rings are nicely in the center of the tube and not out toward the edges where they could maybe not be mating up with the metal quite right. Another thing that I do to try to prevent this problem is I have a padded Pelican case, and when I'm going on a hunt and I'm going to be driving in the truck, I'll put my hunting rifle in that padded case just to try to minimize any bouncing around on the gun. The next one is light. Light can actually be ruining your gun's zero. This one really blew my mind when I learned it, because I thought, man, nobody talks about this. I went to a shooting school, and one thing he taught us is if the sun is here and your target is here, it's going to put your impacts down there. The way that the light enters into the scope is going to push your impact away from wherever the sun is positioned by, a click. And so to get the most precise zero, what he taught us is to sight it in when there's no light whatsoever, and then we may need to compensate for the position of that sun and how it's refracting into the glass. Pretty cool. So when I'm obsessive about a particular gun and trying to get it right, I will go sight it in before light. The next one is something that I have my own opinions and suspicions about, but they really go against the general wisdom. And so I want to caveat this discussion by saying I'm not sure if this is correct, but it is something that I've been wondering about. So people talk a lot about the cold bore zero, meaning if I sit down, guns fresh out of the truck, whatever, has not been shot at all that day, and I shoot, the bore of the barrel is cold, and then I shoot more and, it's warmed up and we get it to change. Sometimes I see people claiming drastic differences in the cold bore shot. And sometimes I've even seen accuracy targets from companies. When you get a brand new rifle and it comes with a target, there'll be one impact that's like an inch away, and they'll just circle that and say cold bore, and then this tiny little clover group and say that's the rest of it. And I always think, was that the cold bore or was this a flyer? And even if it wasn't just a flyer, even if that really was just the cold bore, the way that the rifle is made, you can do things to change the likelihood of that first cold bore shot being away from the group. One thing that a lot of people have suspected is the case with a cold bore shift is that the rifle is not seated fully, that recoil lug pushed against, the action screws, there's a little bit of play, whatever, and we're just not seated fully into the stock. We take a shot and then it kind of shifts everything, and then the next ones will be different. Then we go back to storage and things are kind of relaxing and it's moving, and maybe that's what's causing it. The reason that I say that I have different opinions on cold bore, other than, maybe it is, moving in the stock or something like that. But if we have a fine rifle and we're still seeing some cold bore shift, one, it could just be the shooter himself is cold and it really isn't the gun. It's just you need to warm up. Or maybe it is that it really is just changing it when that barrel is warmed up. But I will say this, frequently when we're really trying to get a perfect group to see what a gun is capable of, we'll shoot 3 shots, give the gun 10 minutes to, really cool down, and then shoot 2 more. And there isn't like a shift in that group between the 2 cold bores that were there and the other shots in there. And that's why I sometimes wonder, is cold bore shift really even real unless we have an error of something that was done in the gun? Anyway, the point is, when you're getting your zero, be sure to watch for any kind of cold bore shift in your particular rifle, because obviously if you're a hunter especially, you really only care about that cold bore shot. And so you may want to do your zero the really, really, really slow way, where you shoot one shot, you wait 10 minutes, and you shoot a second shot, etc. Last reason that your zero may be off and you don't even realize it is you sit down and shoot a group, and between shots you're not even coming off the gun. You know, you shoot, re-rack, and shoot again, and you can shoot a nice little group. Then often I'll see people stand up, go check their target, whatever, come back, and they'll shoot another group. It's a tight group, but it moved on the page. And that kind of perplexed me for a little bit, and I realized what's probably happening is the shooter position just isn't very consistent. They're not in that scope the same way every time. They're changing something in the way that they're shooting, pressure on the bipod, pressure on the back of the stock, whatever. And so it's moving that group around based on the way you're shooting. This can especially be true if your scope doesn't have a parallax knob. Then I can move my head and the reticle appears to shift on the target, right? If you have your parallax set, that's the focus wheel, if you have a separate focus on your scope, then if I move my head like this, the reticle is always pointing at the same thing. Sometimes if you look at a really cheap scope, you'll do that and you'll move it around and you'll see, oh, the crosshair is actually pointing to a little bit different of a spot as I move my head. And that's just gonna be really hard to shoot accurately unless you're a perfect shooter. Speaking of perfect shooter, if you wanna keep learning more and just hear talk about guns, join our forum, get all the Backfire courses and the Backfire Mancast that we do every 10 days. Join Backfire Plus, that's backfire.tv/plus. Thanks everybody for joining me in this video. Now get on that zero before hunting season.